Man, I gotta tell this one story before we start, because everybody, I always have a story about everybody that comes on here. I have probably 3 with this guy that he probably has no idea this story even exists or that it meant that much to me. So, my first, I have 2 that I'm definitely tell tonight, but this one, like my first encounter with him, I have been doing Christian hip hop since my first album came out. By came out, I mean like came out in air quotes. You know, as an independent artist, you know, they taught you a lot about the production. You know, I went to same school my son goes to now, Full Sail, and they taught you a lot about the production of a record, how to make it sound good, how to make it real high quality, how to design that artwork, blah blah blah. And then you get these CDs back, and you don't know what life is like when you got 1,000 CDs in your living room, and so I had to figure out how to get this CD out, right? So I was driving back. I had to, I recorded the CD at school in Full Sail. So I drove back when I was out of school and had all these CDs piled up in the car, boxes and boxes and boxes just piled up everywhere in the car. And so I got back here to D.C. area and had to figure out how to get this CD out, right? And so I met a lady. And I met a lady at George Mason University. Her name was Marsha Sumner. And we did this show, me and In Your Face, we did this show, and I had all these CDs, and she was like, get 2. And she was like, 1 for me and 1 for Matt Anderson. And I was like, well, who is Matt Anderson? Because I know nothing about nothing. All right, he's the program director at 1580. And I was like, what's a program director? Okay. So I gave her the CD. And I remember when I first met him, he was like, man, the beats on it was great. And I just felt, I cannot, you probably don't remember this for nothing, but it will forever stick in my mind that the program director of the radio station said the beats on it was great. He ain't nothing about the lyrics, but it's okay. Man, you have no idea how much that means to me. Okay, this is the Elevation Podcast. My name is Shawn Riff-Raff. Let's go. Special studio. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Elevation Podcast. My name is Shawn Riff-Raff. I'm sitting here with my homeboy, my man. It's been a long, long time. My man, Matt Anderson. What's up, brother?
It's all good in the hood, man. How you doing, bro?
Listen, it's like I'm sitting here interviewing the person that I was hoping to interview 21 years ago with.
Wow.
So
flip the whole script.
Well, not really. when I met you, you were, this was your career. Mm-hmm. I want to start before we get into all the. I'm sure we got a lot of philosophical ideas to share, but I first want to know about you. When I met you, you were already in radio. You were already in your career. You were already doing your thing, and so tell me a little bit about you. I know a little bit, but this isn't you're not like one of my homeboys that I'm bringing up here. Like you have a lot of history that I don't particularly know about. So where did you come from?
Born in Philly, raised in Oakland, California. My parents moved to. Well, first off, thanks, man. I appreciate it. This is like surreal. I'm sitting here. I'm not used to being interviewed. So this is kind of.
Everybody says that. Everybody's like, I'm not used to talking about myself.
I'm
like,
used to flipping
it's starting now.
Right. Born in Philadelphia. Fathers from Philly, mothers from New York, from Harlem. 1970. I kind of gave away my age. We moved to California, and from that point on, my parents were, off into the movement, into the, Black Power movement.
So you moved from Philly to California.
Yep.
Mad Fresh Prince. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Straight to Berkeley initially. Within a year, we moved to Oakland, which is right next door. I mean, it's like Silver Spring in D.C. So we moved to Oakland back in the time at the height of the Black Power movement was going on. So I grew up there. Had, our parents got divorced, when I was 12 or so, and both got remarried. So now I had two new families all
Right.
together. So, to this day, I got 4 brothers, 4 sisters, which
Right.
is one of my brothers was killed. So I'll get into that in just a moment. But, in that point on, my dad always taught television and radio. He taught at an alternative high school in Berkeley back in the early 70s called actually it was called Garvey Institute initially. And then they changed the name to the Black House.
Okay.
And Garvey Institute was named, of course, after Cool. I was visiting my mom about a year ago and stumbled across the old letter from Amy Garvey giving her permission, which was super cool. I was like, Ma, you got to frame this. So I thought that was really cool. So literally what they taught at this alternative high school, they taught people, young folks, specifically high school students, how to do construction work, how to do journalism, how to do video production, audio production. So I'm a little kid, I'm 5, 6 years old. Right. I'm learning how to push buttons and that kind of a thing.
But the buttons are attractive.
And then as I got older, my parents, separated and got divorced and whatnot, my dad kept doing it. As a matter of fact, he's still kind of counseling even to this day. And so I just learned a lot of that. I mean, I was carrying equipment for productions for Nancy Reagan, for Congressman Ronald Dellums, the Isley Brothers, Billy Paul, the Pointer Sisters.
Wow.
And I'm a kid, but I'm learning this stuff,
Right.
and so I didn't want to do it because I wasn't getting paid and I wasn't never be able to hang out. But my dad taught me this stuff and I was around it, I was exposed to it. And I built an interest to it for it. Right. And so when I got to high school, I said, look, I'm going to go to Howard University. Didn't know anything really about historically black colleges and universities. My dad had a friend who was a recruiter for Howard, and I thought I was going to get a track scholarship.
Right. Okay.
Because I ran track. I was one of the top 10 800-meter runners in the state of California. It was in Runner's World magazine my senior year in high school.
Okay.
And so...
so you learn something new every day.
Yeah, so my senior year, I went from East Oakland to all the way to Berkeley High, which was like an hour and a half bus ride.
Right.
Because I was trying to get out of the hood. I mean, I can tell you all the stories of friends and family who've been shot and killed or went to the prison in high school. Right. So I was like, look, I don't want to do this. This is no fun. I'd go visit friends and family in jail, and I said, this ain't cool. I ain't trying to do this. So I figured out that I would move. Finally, I was able to get into Howard University, and I moved 3,000 miles away at 18 years of age, didn't know anybody in D.C., and majored in television production at Howard University. And when I got there, hip-hop was banging. And I mean, this is like the beginning of hip hop starting to rock in '83. Right. And so I volunteered at Howard's AM station, WHBC. Right. And I did a show called the Cultural Jam Session. I'd play a little bit of all kind of music. I was everything from R&B to hip hop to a little bit of light rock. And I was all over the place. Didn't know what I was doing, but I enjoyed music. Right. And so I caught the bug, and then all these brothers I knew who were doing hip hop, mixing and scratching and all that. I was like, man, this looks so cool. I'm meeting all these brothers from New York and Philly and, all the brothers from, Jersey. And I was like, oh man, this is hot. So I started hanging out with these dudes, and I learned how to mix. Right. I learned how to scratch and all. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do radio. Right. And so that's what happened. And then years went by, and I was DJing clubs and parties and that kind of stuff, house parties. And eventually, one thing led to another. I kept banging on the door of Donnie Simpson saying, hey, man, I want a job, man. He was like, no, man, you ain't good enough, man. And so it literally took me 5 years of volunteering at classic rock stations, news stations, and all that stuff. But I'm still trying to learn the craft. And I'm knocking on his brother's door, and I'm like, hey, man, I want a job. He said, yeah, that's cool. You give me the professional, letterhead and professional response. Hey, brother, great, appreciate you. Thank you for your interest, but you're not quite what we're looking for. In other words, you whack. So I finally, a few years go by, I said, look, man, what do I got to do? How do I get to learn to be as good as you, or at least try? Right. So he calls me in one day, and or his assistant did, say, hey, come on in. He wants to meet you. I'm geeking. I'm like, yo. So I go down and sit outside his office, and finally he brings me in and kind of talks to me. What do you want to do with your career? And he explains to me what I needed to do in terms of polishing, my articulation, my production skills, my on-air presence. None of that stuff I knew anything about. Right. I was learning production. Right. And so finally he just said, hey, man, that's cool. Come on back, in a little while when you get yourself together. So a few months go by, and I sent him another air check, which is an on-air demo of what you're working at. He responded back and said, This is good, but not good enough. So I tried again. So finally he said, look, why don't you come in and hang out with some of the DJs here? I hung out with Mike Chase and John Wesley, and he let me sit in with them. And then finally one day he let me sit in with him, and his producer at the time was Tony Perkins. So I came and I sat during the morning show. So I'm geeking. I'm like, oh, this is prime time. I'm just watching. I'm just learning.
Right.
And so I'm sitting next to Tony. He's producing. Donnie's on air doing his thing. And then Donnie slides me over a schedule of the on-air talent. And I'm looking at the names and the times that they're on. And there was a name Anderson. So I'm thinking, okay, I didn't know y'all had a DJ named Anderson. And so he kind of smirks and Tony kind of smokes and they kind of look at me and then they kind of giggle under their breath. And he slides it back to me and says, welcome aboard. You start Friday.
Wow.
And so my first real radio job was at KISS in 1991.
Wow.
Doing overnights from midnight to 6 a.m. on a Friday night. Green as I could be, horrible as I could be, but I learned.
Man, that's that shows a lot though. To listen to your story shows a lot. A lot of people gotta understand that you have to be passionately committed. Mm-hmm. Like you cannot be a quitter because that's it doesn't work that way. So you have to be like. You got to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep pressing towards it. So that's I mean, like, if you guys got nothing out of it, don't quit. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's it, man. I mean, you hit it dead on the head, man, because, if I were to hang out or to stay where I was in my old environment, sometimes you got to get out of your father's house away from your kinfolk into a land that I will show you.
Absolutely.
To quote scripture, sometimes you got to get out of your environment because you don't know what's possible. And I didn't know. I didn't know anything about a historically black college and university. Didn't know anything about fraternities or sororities. Didn't know anything about Washington, D.C. I'm thinking this is the nation's capital. I get here and Howard is in the hood.
Right.
I'm like, yo, I done moved 3,000 miles away to get away from the hood, and I'm living literally right back in it. And this is at the height of Rayful Edmonds doing his thing. Right. So I leave Oakland, which was literally the murder capital of the United States of America in my 11th and 12th grade years in high school. I get to D.C. my freshman year. D.C.'s
becomes the murder capital.
I'm like, yo, what's going on?
I moved away to this. To move back to this.
This ain't working out right.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty much the story. And for me, it was very much my story, and I laugh about this all the time, but I cry at the same time when I see them. When I see Boys in the Hood, I was Trey.
Right.
I was Trey. That was me. I'm in it. I'm around it, but I'm not too deep in it. But I'm kind of in it, but I could slip one wrong move. I could be locked up or dead, and I got friends, and family and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when I was 14 years old, my 16-year-old brother shot and killed another 16-year-old over 2 joints. $2.
Wow.
This dude had pulled guns on him and weapons on him in the past, and this one particular day they got into it. And dude tried to go in the house, and my brother got in the house first, and he came back out, and click, click, click. First 3 chambers were empty. The second 3 chambers were full with bullets, and bow, bow, bow. And he died right there on the front porch in his mother's arms, 3 blocks from Fruitvale Station in that same neighborhood.
Wow.
And so, that was the beginning of, this thing is for real. I'm 14. No longer I'm going from this suburban environment where my parents are in the same home. I'm in this new environment where my parents are divorced and both remarried now. Pops is in the hood. I'm like, okay, this is real.
Wow.
So and that was the beginning of me saying, you know what, I got to get up out the block.
I found that I had a cousin that passed away 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Was murdered, shot, murdered down in Brandywine, and I went to the funeral, which was over at Community of Hope, and what I realized, and so he was a really popular kid. He was 22 years old when he died. Really popular kid, football player when he was in high school. This is 3 years out of high school, but. All of these kids were there, all of these kids. And what I realized is how much, as kids, we don't realize, we can listen to rap songs and watch movies and all that stuff. We don't realize how real this is until it hits home, and it really changes us psychologically. Like it changes our like it's traumatic for us as children to understand that this stuff that these rap songs that you be dancing to, and the lyric, this is actually stuff that could really happen to you. And so we were there, and it was just, you could see these kids like really, really traumatized, like not really knowing that this stuff is really like this stuff is really real, So I feel you. I understand like that, that at 14 years old, just getting that,
Well,
this is where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, and I started carrying a gun then. I mean, I
Yeah.
started carrying a gun pretty much everywhere I went. And I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic slave syndrome
Right.
is real. And I did a post a while back about that post-traumatic hood disorder.
Right.
When in fact, I mean, if you go to a foreign country, you go to Afghanistan, Iraq, Southeast Asia, anywhere else, whether it's a war-torn place, Central Africa, you'll find people who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And any person who's military has gone overseas and seen combat. That's really what it is. It's a shock. It's an emotional trauma because you're seeing people killed. You're jumping when you hear bullets and sirens and all that stuff.
Right.
And so you come back with this emotional baggage. It's a trip. I didn't realize that my upbringing had affected me until I went home for Christmas after my first semester at Howard. I'm here in D.C., and D.C. is a whole new thing, so I didn't know who the movers and shakers were. I was just on campus. I'm trying to learn school.
Right.
Literally, my freshman year at Howard was my best semester in my entire life.
Right.
I had all A's and one B because I was so focused on I got to get it right. And I went home for Christmas, and all of a sudden I'm hearing the gunshots and the sirens, and I'm like, wow, and I forgot about it.
Wow.
Because you become so numb to it after you're hearing it all the time. Because back in the day, I could say, oh, okay, that's a 38, that's 3 blocks away. Okay, that's an AK. That's so and so boys wilding out. You just kind of could tell the direction and the caliber, and you sort of after a while you ignore it. It becomes white noise to you.
So I want you to know that I've never been able to to be like, oh yeah, that's a 38, about 3 blocks away.
Well, you got
That sounds like a 9.
But bro, you got to know, man, because you're like, I don't want to go that direction. So that was an interesting experience. But when you talk about that whole thing, and then you go years later, my other brother was shot and killed by police. But this is an interesting situation for me because when I finally, I moved to D.C., went to a couple years of school, got married a couple years into Howard, had a child, and decided to move back to California. I said, I'm going to take a break from school. I'm going to move back to California. I think I can get my career off the ground now. I may know some people. I got a little something under my belt. Nothing was jumping off. And then I find myself being pulled back to the streets. Now, I'm not in the church. I'm not saved. I didn't come up in church.
Right.
And because all the cats I saw in church were either soft
Right.
or pimps and players,
Right.
Pimping people for money. So
Yeah.
they were not authentic. They got Jerry curls and perms and driving Cadillacs.
Right.
Or they're effeminate. So for me, all the real tough guys and heroes in the hood were thugs,
Streets,
gangsters. So that to me were my heroes. So I go back and I say, I can get a job in radio or TV. I'm going to try. So I get back there, young guy, early 20s, one child, married, nothing really kicking off because I knew I had to make money because they want you to volunteer. So nothing's working. So I said, you know what? I've tried everything. I said, let me try God. And so we started going to church, and finally I gave my life to the Lord in the same neighborhood, 84th in MacArthur Boulevard in East Oakland. And I got saved there, and I gave my life to the Lord, and I said, you know what? I'm going to try my best. And I turned everything down, and within about 6 or 8 months later, found myself, not even 6 months later, it was February of 1989. 6 months later, so you want to hear the whole truth. This is where we at, bro. This is not the shiny brand new radio guy. This is back in the day. This is back in the day. So February 1989, get saved. At that period of time, me and my brother, we had a grow house. We were growing marijuana before it was legal.
Right.
It was not legal at the time. We had a couple of different grow houses, one in Oakland, one in Sacramento, and you growing a bunch, not like 2 or 3 plants, like rooms full,
Right.
with lights and chemicals and all the stuff to make it grow fast.
Gotcha.
And so there was a business model to that, but there was also a danger and a risk involved.
Right.
And so this particular thing, I said, you know what, I'm saved now, but I got all this product. I got to get rid of it. I said, okay, if I just sell it, I'm done. I can move back to the East Coast and be done. So we go to do this deal, a buddy of mine. We go to do this deal, and we go to way up in the hills, in the Berkeley Hills. It's real cloudy. It's real foggy this night, and you can't see each other. I said, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable because I can't see, it's just me and my boy, and My buddy, he referred me to another guy and another guy. So we're going to meet these two guys that I don't know. And so I said, nah, I don't think this is a good spot. Let's go down to the marina where it's not foggy. We do that, go down to the marina. Everything's cool. We do the deal, transaction. I got cash. He got his product. We're done. We drive a half a block. My buddy makes an illegal U-turn, but we don't realize it. I don't realize it. He had just bought this 280Z, Datsun 280Z. And he's brand new. Well, it wasn't brand new. It was brand new to him. It was used.
Right.
And so I'm like, all of a sudden he makes his U-turn. Woo! I'm like, oh, I think your mans and them dropped down. They was feds. So I said, hit it. All you got to do is make it to one county, one exit on the highway. We'll be good. So he punches it. He gets cold feet and says, nah, man, I'm going to pull over. So meanwhile, I got all this money on me. I got 1/4 ounce of personal on me, and I got a pistol on me. It's legal. I bought it, got the receipt even in my pocket. So he pulls over. I take the pistol out because I don't want to be caught up in, I don't want it on me. So I stick it under the seat, I think. Gets under the seat, doesn't go all the way under the seat. So, he comes up, shines the light, points it under the seat, and he's looking, okay, all right, I'm just going to give you a ticket, stick around, guys. So he goes back to his car. It's taking him a long time to write this ticket, I'm thinking. So all of a sudden you hear, driver, put your hands out of the car or you'll be seriously injured. Passenger, put your hands out of the car. I'm like, oh. So, we're obeying the commands. And so, he takes my buddy out, lays him face flat on the highway, pulls me out, lays me face flat on the highway. It's 11:50 at night on Memorial Day weekend, 1989. I'll never forget this. It's Thursday. Had it been Friday, it'd be another story. It's Thursday night. Tell you what happened. So he's got us out. Meanwhile, they get us up, handcuff us, put us on the car, and I'm able to look around. There's 13, I counted them, 13 officers, different counties, jurisdictions, city, county, highway patrol, shotguns, plain clothes, pistols.
Wow.
And I'm like looking at my boy. I'm like, what is going on? Turns out they saw the pistol under the seat. That was it. It was a legal gun, but they went through all of that. Long story short, take us to jail. They let me out on the OR, on reconnaissance, got a probation. A couple months later, I moved back to the East Coast. And I stopped on my way. My brother was in prison at the time. I stopped at Vacaville Correctional Facility to see my brother. And I used to sneak drugs into him in the jail. And this time, I had nothing for him. I said, look, man, I got nothing but the gospel for you. That's all I got, man. I don't have nothing. I literally would have to go through 5 gates to get to the visiting area where he would be at. This is the place where Charles Manson was. When he was there, Charles Manson was there. Wow. So I would get there, and I'm literally stopping with my truck with everything on it, with my little Chevy Chevette hooked to the back. I stopped at Vacaville Correctional Facilities to say goodbye to him. And just told him, hey, man, I'm done. I'm out. I tapped out. I gave my life to the Lord. He let me get through, with this little experience I just experienced, right, which could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
and I was gone. And so from that point on, and so I actually literally was the last time I saw my brother alive. About a year and a half later, he was robbing banks and robbing people, and police caught up with him and got into a shootout, and that was it. Wow. So that was, and the day I found out about that, I was working at KISS. And I was on my way to, what was it called? Not for Sisters Only, those People's Expo, one of them kind of big festival events. Right. And I'm on my way out the door. Sunny day, beautiful day, heading out the door, feeling good. I'm going up there to sign autographs. I'm new radio guy. By this time, this is early 90s, 92 maybe, somewhere around there. And I get there, and I'm heading out the door, and I get this call from my sister, and she's like, hey, Paul's dead. I'm thinking, maybe some girl got him, because he used to be a womanizer. Right. And it turns, she told me the story and that he had been in a shootout with police, and that was it. Wow. And I had to go to this event and pull it and smile and shake hands and sign autographs. How y'all doing?
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
And so that was my story, and I'm sticking to it. Or at least part of it.
That was your segment on radio. Wow.
Just so you know, some of this I've never talked about publicly. I've talked about family and stuff, but I've preached it before, but I've never done this on broadcast.
So when did we get? I'm probably gonna fast forward you, but when did we get into? I mean, there was the I've accepted the Lord, I'm saved point. But when did this this become more than just a career? When was it like ministry? Because it's a lot of ministry.
For me, being saved and finally getting a job in radio in the early 90s, I'm going to church regularly, I'm reading the word, but I have a secular job, or so-called secular.
Right.
Now, mind you, radio at that time, doing R&B radio wasn't like as buck wild as it is now. It
Right,
was,
of course.
you're doing R&B, you're doing Freddie Jackson, Stephanie Mills, Patti LaBelle,
Right.
And then eventually I got they created this thing called the Saturday Night Mega Mix, which was the first rap show in D.C.
Right.
And they let me be the host. So I'm interviewing, Tupac and Naughty by Nature, Heavy D, folks like that. So I'm having a good
Nice.
time. We're having a good time.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this. And so eventually, a few years go by, and the station was sold. Now, mind you, I'm still saved, and I'm praying during this season of time, because I'm starting to run out of gas in terms of feeling this double thing pulling on me. I'm like,
Right.
okay, am I trying to walk upright, but the Christian world seems so corny and so far and foreign from what I'm used to.
Right.
But over here, I know it ain't right.
Right.
Drinking, smoking, and everything else. So how do I justify that? So I'm praying, literally. I'm praying for at least a year and a half or so. Lord, allow me to use my gifts in an environment that is glorifying to you. Careful what you pray for, because you just might get it.
You might get it.
So
Might not like it.
yeah, man. And so the station was sold. The station was sold to Radio One, and during this period of time, during the last 6 or 8 months, I'm looking for a job because I know it's coming. It's a long time. It's not like buying a house. It's a big corporation, so
Right.
it takes time. So by this time, I'm kind of laying in the cut. I'm filling in. I'm doing afternoon drive. My ratings I'm killing it. But I'm like, man, I hate to lose this job because my ratings are good. And so, but I knew I had to find this justification, this foundation of faith, of being able to use my gifts and talents in an environment. It didn't have to be a super churchy environment
Right.
or gospel environment, but I just knew I was getting a little too far out there. And so I remember one night where it really hit me for sure was New Year's Eve, 94, somewhere around there. And I'm DJing a party at a hotel that doesn't even stand anymore. It used to be right across the street from the Pentagon. It was in Crystal City.
Wow.
Top room, penthouse, party rocking. And I'll never forget, I was playing Frankie Beverly and them. I think it was Frankie Beverly. Was that around that time? I just remember the party was rocking, and it was an R&B song, and it's cranking. I'm like, everybody, oh. And I'm not into it, but the party is rocking.
But the party is rocking.
And I'm feeling, and it was almost like the room got quiet to me. It was like I couldn't even hear the music. And the Lord spoke to me and said, see where you're leading my people?
Wow.
And I'm not making it, I'm not shooting shots at any R&B artist. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Right.
But I
Couldn't even hear R&B music.
yeah,
Lord was
yeah,
speaking.
yeah. it got real quiet in
Yeah.
my spirit, and I was like, and I stopped dancing and partying. And I paused for a minute. I looked, and the Lord was like, look where you're leading my people.
Wow.
And so that's when I got serious about my prayer. Lord, shift me. So one thing led to another. Station was sold. I had a semi-promise to go to another station, which would have been magic at the time.
Right.
They fired out everybody because that's what they have to clean house. So I'm, last day comes, the promise doesn't come through of getting this new job. I'm walking down the hall. By this time, I got 2 kids, another third one on the way. And I'm walking down the hall, and I'm like, man, I ain't got no job. I got kids, and what am I going to do? Walking down the hall, and I see one of the owners of the new station walking down the hall, and I'm passing him. And he's like, hey, how you doing, man? I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking he was going to say something. He takes 4 or 5 more steps down the hall, turns around and says, hey, Matt, hey, we got a job for you in Baltimore.
Oh, wow.
We need a production director up there. Talk to so-and-so, the operations manager. Called her the next day. They hired me. So I had to commute from Virginia all the way to Baltimore for the next 3 years.
Wow.
As the next part of my Christian journey. And there's more to it than that. So, but I'll let you do your thing first before I get into that deep part. That was another challenge of my faith as well.
I was there for 9.
Wow.
9 years. Spent 9 years in Baltimore.
Wow.
Baltimore is a place.
Yeah, and what I learned was I didn't really get to notice. It's interesting because my grandfather was from there. I didn't know that. When he got out of high school, he moved to Philly and that kind of thing, and then he moved with us to California when he was in his older years. So as production director, I was producing spots, radio commercials for all 4 radio stations. One was talk, one was gospel, one was old school R&B, and the other one was hip hop. It was 92Q Magic, 95.9 WWIN, and what was the other one? WOLB. And so, I'm commuting back and forth. I'm happy. I'm in the cut. I'm laying, I'm reading my word every day, catching the MARC train up there, walking, back and forth, catching the subway in D.C., the metro in D.C. And still, my faith is growing. By this time, I'm sensing the call to ministry, to preach and teach. By this time, it's 3 years going by, and so finally, I'm just like, okay, Lord, tell me what I'm supposed to do next. And so I went to my pastor, told him, and he's like, okay, this is, how do you know? And I explained him the call, what I felt, what I believe he was saying, the Lord was saying. And so he took me to the bookstore. Nobody's at church this day. He takes me to the bookstore, and he bought me this book called Making of a Leader by Frank Damasio. And it talks about all these different leaders throughout Scripture and how they responded to their call. And that thing changed my life.
And they still use that for leadership.
It blew me away.
It is a good book.
And so then, when that happened, so then by this time now, I'm still doing spots. At this point, I'm not DJing parties. I'm not in the club.
Right.
I'm trying to walk upright. But I'm getting side business. People are, they're like, oh man, we love the way you produce commercials. The club spots, the concerts, the car dealerships. We love the way they sound. So I start getting these things for like strip clubs. And then it was like, okay, 2-for-1 drink specials and 4 ladies. And then the next one, the guy would come back and he'd be like, okay, it's 7 ladies and 3-for-1 drink specials or whatever, Then it's like 12 ladies. And I'm like, about the third spot, I'm like, you know what? And that's how the enemy would do. You just keep, because the money was good and I needed it.
Right.
But finally I had to come to the guy. I said, look, man, I said, I can't do this no more. Even though nobody knew me on the air, but I was just, I can't do it. Right.
Right.
And so that was part of the beginning of me defining my 4 corners of my character.
That's where you really know it's God, because integrity is a thing. When it's not God, integrity sometimes is just really not a thing. And I can do both. And I don't feel no conviction. I don't feel nothing. I just don't feel it.
Yeah.
And so you really know when it's God when I remember me being different than you, I was never in the streets. I never had those type of experiences. But when I had a real encounter with God, I felt conviction taking batteries from my job. Like I need batteries to put in the Walkman or whatever it was at the time, whatever. And they were just flowing where I worked at. It really doesn't matter. But I was like, ooh, I need some batteries. Ooh.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And it's like
faith over little.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden, like like this conviction over things that you wouldn't have been convicted over before begins to kick in, and that's when it's the Lord pulling at you, because all of a sudden it's like these little things, you know what I mean? Like do a commercial, you get the money, makes sense, but nobody knows you're doing it. The only thing that actually matters is integrity, because nobody actually knows who this is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
but he knows. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
When you talk about how a double-minded man is unstable,
yeah,
in all his ways, and when I talk about the 4 points of my character starting to be defined for me, one of the ways that you know who you are is what you won't do. If you think about a sculptor whittles away at all the unnecessary things, whether it's stone, clay, wood. He whittles away at all the stuff that's unnecessary until he finds that masterpiece on the inside.
Right.
And so for me, I had to define, who am I? What are my 4 corners of who I am? And I said, what won't I do? I won't deny my God. Number 2, I won't deny my race or my culture. Number 3, I won't deny my women. I mean, when I say women, my mother, my wife, my daughter, my sister. I got 4 sisters. So there's certain things I felt a conviction about, the kinds of spots I was producing, kind of commercial. I said, there's somebody's sister. There's somebody's daughter. There's somebody's daughter. I ain't judging them. I ain't got no pit to throw them in, but I'm just thinking, for me, they're queens.
Right.
The way I see it is that, if God created anything better than a black woman, he kept it for himself.
Right.
So the fourth, and then the fourth
tweet
thing.
That.
Right. And then the 4th thing was and is, and still is I won't deny my manhood. that's just who I am. I mean, in the entertainment industry, there are a lot of different things that people will offer you,
Right.
And I'm straight.
Right.
No disrespect to anybody else. No, shooting no shots. That's just who I am.
Right.
I'm clearly defined about. Once you know who you are,
Yeah.
it helps you to know who you aren't
Absolutely.
and what you won't do. You got to know.
Right.
And so another thing for me is I tell folks all the time is, man, you got to know. One of the ways you help to define that, maintain that, protect yourself is to know your kryptonite and to know your vibranium. Mm-hmm. Kryptonite is that thing that makes your superpowers go away.
Right.
And vibranium is the thing that helps to enhance or maintain. So for me, knowing what my kryptonite is, slick talking cats, pretty women, I know what I like to fight. I'll punch you in your face for talking slick. Okay, right. I have to know how do I maintain self-control. Fruit of the spirit is self-control. And then the other side of that, your vibranium, what is the strength? How do you strengthen yourself? Reading the word every day, a good, healthy diet of the word, of prayer, of associating with other believers.
Right.
Having an accountability partner or partners. So those are the things that kind of been helped me through that season of shift and change. And then again, it was another period of time. If I'm to talk about those 3 years of Baltimore production time, again, I needed a job,
right.
But I'm like, Lord, how do I use again, here I am praying again. And we're talking 4, 5, 6 years later. I'm going through this 3-year period in Radio 1 in Baltimore. How do I use my gifts? Well, one of my coworkers at the time, he was a sales manager or sales associate, sales executive. People sell radio time, commercials.
Right.
Glenn Brooks, my buddy, we're still friends to this very day. He got a job going to D.C., back to D.C., and there was a station, little old AM station in D.C., 1996, that used to be a hip-hop station. It was WPGC AM. They were flipping it to a gospel station. He got the opportunity to become the first general manager for that station. He said, look, man, hey, when I go, I want you to go with me. I said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to consider, being on the air. I said, okay. Well, I'd never done gospel radio. I'd filled in a couple times back in the day for my man Ted Mebane on KISS for his gospel show. But then I would turn around and do the hip hop show the next night. so I was kind of all over the place, double-minded man. So long story short, a few weeks went by. He finally got his new job. He called me and said, hey, man, come in to interview for this job. Came down and interviewed for it. He said, okay, no. He said, when you come, I want you to interview not just for the on-air, but I want you to interview to be the program director. I was like, I ain't never been a program director. I mean, I understand radio, but I've never been a program director. So I interviewed against 14 other guys, all of whom had way more experience than me. And one thing led to another. I was the person selected.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of Heaven 1580.
Wow. So you was there from the beginning.
The very day one.
Wow.
Day one.
So you learn something new. You learn something new about talking to people every day. Interesting. I was talking to my fiance earlier, and I was telling her about like another experience with you that you don't know about. I had this project that I put out called Hip Hop Songs for Worship, 2003, and I sent it everywhere, like to all the radio stations, and you were gone from 1580 at that point. Now I didn't know where you went. I just sent it the record everywhere, right? The record got to WAVA, and you were there.
Yeah.
And
that was interesting.
Unbeknownst to me. So, unbeknownst to me, you were there, right? And, one day I was having dinner, like, I don't know, Sunday dinner at my parents' house, whatever. And so they had this guy at the corner, of their cul-de-sac, corner, but nobody in the neighborhood really liked him.
Right.
So he was in the cul-de-sac, but he used to wash his car every Sunday. Like, he used to have both his cars. Like, he had a Jaguar and like one of those, like, Dodge, Chevy Silverado, big giant flatbed. Pickup. And so I was driving in one day, and he's blasting his radio, out of both cars, and it's my song.
Wow.
I ain't paying no attention. Because he's on my parents' block, so I didn't pay no attention. I just automatically assumed my parents liked him now or something, and they gave him the CD or whatever. And so I was like, y'all, I guess y'all gave him. They was like, we ain't giving no CD. We ain't giving no. And so I went back out there. He's listening to Waver.
Wow.
And I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know my record was in rotation on that radio station. But you would put it in rotation at that radio station. And so it was like, well after you were gone, that record was still rolling in rotation.
Wow.
Like I remember it sent out like 2 songs or something like that to every.
Well, that reminds me, man. One of the things that I've always, it took me a minute to kind of figure this out, but a lot of times I run into people and they'll ask about purpose. They ask, what's my purpose? I'm frustrated where I am. And a lot of times I believe that God will put us in circumstances where, the very thing that gets on your last nerve is what you're called to fix. What is it that you're called to fix? And usually a hint of that is what gets on your last nerve, what just drives you nuts. Do you hate, bad fashion? Do you hate bad hair? Do you hate people who are out of shape and you want to be a fitness trainer? Part of that is your thing. For me, it was bad and still is bad production, bad media, especially in the Christian arena. When I first got to 1580, it was an AM station, 67,000 listeners, because it was flipping from a hip hop station, not very many listeners. It went to low power at night. So it was an AM station, 50,000 watts in the day, like literally 1,000 watts at night, which is, it'll cover your block. That's it. Right. It's not much of anything at night. So, but for me, for years, I always thought gospel music has the most important message in the history of the world. The best singers, the best musicians, but radio was just corny. I'm like, it was driving me nuts.
Wow.
And every other artist was trying to do what another artist had done from 50 years earlier. And I'm like, dude. Crazy. So I would say, look, why don't we take these production elements that I learned from hip hop and R&B in the secular arena, take the same techniques, change the techniques are the same. What is it? Motive, method, message. Our motive is what? We're doing it because he first loved us.
Right.
We love him because he first loved us.
Absolutely.
Message never changes. 66 books, it never changes. Yeah. But the method has got to change. We were just talking about that off air earlier, how their distribution of content. Ain't nobody watch, very few people are listening to radio as much as they used to because now we have Netflix and Hulu and streaming and Spotify and all these other ways to get content. Right. Now. It's still the same content.
Kind of, but it's content less the gatekeeper.
Yes.
And yes. I think that's what.
Yes.
I think that's what has changed the world so much because people feed you what they want you to have. And the world has changed now so that people can't feed you what they want you to have anymore. Now people can go directly to the artist and get what the artist wants to create. And so like the gatekeeper part, I don't think radio is going anywhere, but their ability to charge high prices of advertising is, you know what I mean? Their ability to dictate what art actually becomes relevant is absolutely gone. You know what I'm saying?
Well, messaging is there too. Yeah. That's the other thing that I found that was a real challenge in different managerial roles I found is that was another challenge, was trying to protect the integrity of the gospel. Yeah. By, I'm like, look, we can't run a Jerry Springer or Ricky Lake spot or a happy hour spot on a gospel station. Right. Even though that they're, whoever's buying the advertising is buying all 4 stations to advertise their products or services. I hear you, but that would be like me going to a Jewish neighborhood trying to sell pork chop sandwiches. I may have the best deal on pork chop. Right. But you know what? It's
a waste of.
Not only will they not buy it, you're offending them. You're actually going to make them angry. So I had to kind of explain that to upper management. Hey, man, this doesn't make sense.
And it's also a waste of money for the advertiser. Like there is no point in going to a vegan place trying to sell steaks. It's a waste of money for the advertiser. You're spending money to advertise to people who simply don't want your stuff. That's silly. Which is another way that the world has changed now because I don't want to watch a Summer's Eve commercial, right? Like it is no relevance to me. So anybody spending their money to advertise Summer's Eve to me is wasting their money,
Sure.
right? But however, now the way advertising works is you can single out who it is you want this to go to and only spend money at that in that arena, which is so much different. The world is so much different now than it was, you know, when radio ruled, you know, now Pandora rules and you know, Spotify and whatever.
Well, you know, one of the things, and that also allows us, I think, you know, this platform that you're talking about, these platforms that you're talking about, allow us an opportunity to be authentically us.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
I can totally unpack who I am as opposed to me trying. I heard, I think it was Will Smith said it the other day on the Breakfast Club, and it was really cool the way he said it. He says, we spend all of this time trying to build up these characters or caricatures of ourselves.
Right.
And if it works, meaning that we're able to sell products and services, we become famous, we become successful because we fit into this caricature, then we keep doing it. And then eventually we lose ourselves.
Right.
When in fact, it's like, wait a minute now, how about if I just unpack me? Let me be authentically me. And I'm very much in that. That's why it resonated with me when I heard it the other day. I was like, wow, that's exactly where I'm at now. I spent so many years trying to help other people build products and services or brands. I said, look, you know, even if I got to lay on the backside of the mountain for years like I have,
Right.
I ain't been dormant. I've been laying in the cut, doing ministry, supporting other ministries, supporting my church, Kingdom Fellowship, AME Church. Shout out Pastor Wiley. That supporting other people that are doing ministry in that sense, but there are still things that I've got to unpack in me. Because for me, this is me. Hell for me is not going to be fire and brimstone.
Right.
The thing that I fear the most would be getting face to face with God. I'm done. My days are over. And I'm able to look him in the face and say, you know, he's able to say to me, what did you do with what I gave you? Did you unpack? Did you eliminate? Did you maximize everything that I told you to do?
Absolutely.
I gave you all these resources, time, talent, treasure, skills, abilities, opportunities. Did you maximize those? No, well, I held on to it for you, Lord. No, but I spent time helping everybody else. Wait a minute.
I didn't tell you to do that.
Yeah, I'm not a preacher like a certain person. I'm not a singer. I'm not a musician. I'm not a TV, radio person.
Absolutely
that's not who I am. So when I get to the authentic me, and that goes for everybody watching, get to that authentic you, what's in you that you need to unpack, even if it takes you time to develop it, write it down, write the vision, make it plain, develop it. You know, nobody just builds a house. You have an architectural diagram first.
Right. Man, that's crazy. It's interesting. I've been on this whole tip. Everything has been about what am I, you know, with all that the Lord has given me, He's also given me the will of God for my life, and so He purposefully gave me what He gave me down to the way that I think, right? Yeah, and you know, He purposed me that in eternity. He purposed me that, you know, He gave me that before before the foundations of the world was made. Therefore, He gave it to me if the foundations of the world weren't made, if time did not exist. So He gave it to me that outside of time, in eternity. And He purposed me for a reason. And he wants me to use it in a certain way. And my job was to seek Him to be in the will of God. You know what I'm saying? Because that's how it all comes together. You know, for me, that's how it all comes together, by being in the will of God. It doesn't come together because for me, everything I have is literally abstract. Like like you're a good salesperson on one hand, and you're a rapper on the other one. You're audio engineer on one hand. You know what I'm saying? So it's all of this, all of these sort of abstract ideas, but they all fit together in the will of God. So my goal or my job was to consistently and daily search for the will, what do you want me to, how do you want me to use this? What do you want me to do? What can I do? How do I stay in your will? How do I stay in your will? How do I stay in the will? Because one step outside of his will throws off the matrix for me. You know what I'm saying? I can, if I step outside of the will, the whole, I start seeing black cats in the matrix. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's when you change something.
Right. You know, what blessed me about what you said, man, is you got all these different parts, man. These are all these different skills, tools. You know, you don't use a hammer to tighten up a bolt. You know, you don't use a screwdriver to, to banging a nail. There's specific tools for specific tasks. And in your case, now I said that to you earlier, and I've always admired about you, man, is your ability, your business sense.
Yeah.
Your ability to the distribution piece from day one with your music. It was always like, okay, that's cool. I don't need no major label. I'm gonna do this myself.
Yeah.
And your production was always top level. And I'm like, man, this brother's got it going on. I'm like, who produced it? Oh, I did. I'm like, what? And the lyrics were clever. And I said, okay, this brother keeps me thinking. Even when I'm listening to his lyrics, it makes me think. I said, oh man, his word. That was another thing back in the day with gospel, man. We started doing hip hop, gospel hip hop or gospel go-go. Man, I literally got cussed out by Christians. Cussed smooth out by Christians. What are you doing? Because it was foreign. It was unfamiliar. It was uncomfortable. Now the word, death and life are in the power of the tongue is what the word says.
Right.
The word is exactly the same. It's not the beat. It's not the structure. What does gospel music in Beijing sound like? What does gospel music in Rwanda sound like? What does gospel music sound like in Romania? There are cultural sensitivities in those environments.
Absolutely.
But if the word is there, and so it took a while for people to kind of catch on to that kind of stuff. So they're like, oh, okay, gospel rap is people are, oh, okay, it's the word, and it's packaged in a way that people could digest it who are familiar with that particular culture.
Right.
I remember in Bible college, one of my professors said something to me one day. Well, he posed it to the whole class, and it was an evangelism class, and the brother was like, yeah, so tell me, what would you do, if you're trying to share the gospel with somebody, Pookie in them, that was the word he used, Pookie in them, and you on the basketball court, and you in the hood, and you trying to share the gospel, and Pookie looks at you and says, oh, man, that's the white man's religion, or, oh, that's,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's, that's colonialism. And so I had to tell him, I said, my perspective in that point was, I said, okay, I got to deal with him from a cultural, historical perspective as opposed to a super deep, theological one. And I hit him, I said, look, I said, when Mary and Joseph had to hide Jesus, the baby Jesus, from, the killing of the innocents, they went to Africa. They went to Egypt.
That's right.
They didn't hide him in Austria or Poland because he would have stuck out like a sore thumb. They went south.
Right.
And he blended right in.
Wow.
And so he's like, oh, no, that ain't going to work. That ain't going to work. And so my point was he didn't understand it because culturally I came from Pookie and them. I could relate to Pookie and them, pro-black radical. I get it right on. And so I could understand that cultural connotation in that sense, in that context. So what I'm saying is that with the gospel, when it comes to business or ministry or opportunities or the way that we communicate it, we have to consider your audience. Who are you talking to? Now, that's one thing I did learn in radio and TV is consider the audience. There's a reason we have specific channels. There's a sports channel. There's a classical channel. There's a gospel channel. There's an R&B old school channel. It's different audiences.
Yeah.
And
I try to, I tried to always, people that were with me, I always try to give them that. I'm like, listen, in Christian hip hop, this is a funny thing because we don't have an infrastructure, we don't have a platform. So you got to consider where you're asking for people to play you at. And so like like when I did hip hop songs for worship, it worked so much because I was just mixing a little bit of hip hop over these worship songs, and it worked because I was asking for people that played worship to listen to hip hop. So I had to balance it. I was like, you can't. Because there is no Christian hip hop radio station. Like there is no, you might get 30 minutes at midnight, but there is no like Christian hip hop radio station. So you kind of gotta blend in, and that's it. I used to like preach this to us, like we if you're gonna be on secular radio, if you want them to play you, you're gonna have to fit in. Unfortunately, I know we don't want to. That's just the way that it is. So and I've been like that forever. Like, listen, consider your audience. Consider your audience. If you're gonna speak to young people, consider your audience. If you're gonna speak you always got to consider the people that are in front of you. You know what I'm saying? Like
audiences have changed today. I mean, the way that we digest information now is a whole lot different than it was 10 years ago. I mean, we didn't have cell phones.
Right. Oh gosh.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the TV went off. and the national anthem played at midnight. You know, I remember Head on Joan, man. I do. Yeah, I'm old school.
You know, I'm kind of old enough to remember having a black and white TV in the room with the little things,
right?
You know,
with the pliers.
Yeah,
right?
Sticking a, you can only go up to
coat hanger.
Yeah, channel 14. You think it was channel 14, and then after that you had to go to the VHF channels on the bottom one, you know, and the little adjuster thing in the middle of the wheel. I remember.
But you know, I've found now that when we get back to that whole concept of unpacking what's in you, you know, part of it is just being mindful, like you said, of the audience, but also being true to what it is. Because you know, I got less years in front of me than I do have behind me, most likely. You know, of course, I want to be 120. It'd be a wonderful thing, but I'm mindful and realistic that, you know, in terms of average ages of African American men in the United States of America, you know, they want you to work until you're 67, then you retire, and then they say you may live to 75. So you get, what, 8 years of living? So no, so now you got to unpack it now. Do it now. I preached a message years ago called Do It Now, because, you know, we've got friends and family who don't make it or get sick or other opportunities or tragedies come up to distract you.
Right.
And so you got to be focused on you know, the thing about it is the enemy brings distraction. You know, distraction, deception, and disease. There's three of his main tools and get you off course, you know, from what your focus is. It was a line in the movie, the Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi says to the little boy, the new Karate Kid, was it Jaden?
Jaden.
And he takes him out, and he's trying to take him up to this mountain to the grandmaster, you know, martial arts, you know, teacher. And they're on the way, and he's a kid, you know, he's a precocious kid, and he takes him, and they go out on this little pier. And he's just goofing around, and Mr. Miyagi says, you know, focus. And he's, I am focused. And he pops him in the head, and he almost falls in the water, the little boy does. And he grabs him just inches from the water, and he pulls him back up, and he says, your focus needs more focus.
Right.
And that's one of the things I think that we do a lot of times. There's a reason that, you know, Kentucky Fried Chicken does chicken. They literally used to do hamburgers and hot dogs.
Did they?
And almost went out of business back in the day.
Really?
And when they focused on them 13 herbs and spices, just doing chicken, it worked.
I ain't never knew they did.
And so when you focus your focus, what is it that you're called to do? What is specific? You focus what it is that you're called to do.
Absolutely. Man, that's a good. Man, that's good. Man, listen, we are, gosh, like, you know, I expected a good conversation with you. I don't know if I expected to be this good, but we are.
Glory, man. We just sharpening each other's iron, man. Sharpening each other's iron, bro.
So every show, I got to get to this part. There's two parts I got to get to. First, I ask this question every show, so I got to ask you this.
Okay.
If you could change something about the way the world functions, if you could change something about the world, if you had, you know, if God gave you the moment to be like, hey, I'm giving you the grace to do this. What is that thing that you would change about the world?
The thing that I would change if God gave me the grace to influence the world in a way that people would obey it would be to get individuals to listen. To spend, you know, I mean, you've probably heard this, you know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we could listen twice as much. And I think that social media in particular, and I've been guilty of this, is social media in particular, people tend to talk.
Absolutely.
And we're mean. And I think even if you get down to somebody wearing a white hood or somebody from the hood, sitting down in a conversation, having a conversation, and I can listen to you and hear, hey, guess what? You want, you know, peace, joy, the pursuit of happiness. You want good food. You want a good education for your kids. You want to be able to have a good future. You want your life to be healthy and comfortable. That's really what it all boils down to. So the kinds of rifts and conflict we see today in the political arena, in the racial arena, globally, economically, are all based on people trying to get their own thing. And if we gave more than we pulled, I think we could do better. So for me, it would be number one, to listen and understand. Just stop for a minute. Just pause for a minute. Listen. Do your best to try to consider there may be some truth in what they're saying, at least from their perspective. They could be wrong, but they could be absolutely right about their wrongness.
I mean, they have their truth, and their truth doesn't actually have to.
And it's not necessarily the truth.
Right. Well, it's not necessarily factual.
Okay.
Because your truth does not necessarily is based in actual fact. It's sometimes based in
Your
how
perception.
you felt or your perception or your vantage or whatever. That's. But yeah, when you listen, it's like sometimes I like to be in the midst of cultures. Like I like to be in different cultures.
Yeah.
Because I learn a lot by listening to different types of people on the exact same subject. And it's like, even when it comes down to ministry and church and just listening to different people, and it's interesting to listen to Chinese people do Jesus. To me, it is very interesting to listen to them. It is interesting to listen to different types of people do stuff. And listening is in a lot of cases it's freedom. To me, learning and listening and understanding is freedom, and being able to take bits and pieces back and share it with people from your culture who aren't listening. You know what I'm saying? It's like it was interesting to me to listen to atheists. And realizing I had a conversation with a group of atheists, and I was in at the time. I had a lot of white friends. Still have a lot of white friends, but at the time I was in a circle, and a bunch of rock dudes. And I remember getting into a conversation with a guy. He said, "I could prove to you in 5 minutes that Jesus is not real." And I was like, "And I will listen to you for all that time, and I can prove to you in about 15 seconds that he is." And he said, and so, he had a good argument. He went through the different scriptures and blah, 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 blah. He was like, because it says here, and blah, 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 and I was like, okay. And no, he said God is not real, not Jesus. He's like, I can prove to you God is not real. And I was like, okay. And I was like, and so when he finished, I was like, gotcha, I got you. I can prove to everyone sitting in this room that God is real. Say, how? Because each of you looked for him.
I like that.
Because you can't deny that your humanity hungered for him. Because it's your humanity, it's your instinct. You look for him.
Looking for home.
You didn't get the answer that you wanted to, but you were looking. You're still looking. That's why you're trying to prove it wrong. You sound like a hater.
That's good, man. That's good. But back to that piece you were talking about not just listening, but looking at other cultures. I remember one of the things I loved as a kid, or when I say a kid, my senior year in high school, when I went to Berkeley High, I commuted all the way from Oakland to Berkeley because I wanted to run on this track team. One of the best track coaches in the country at the time. And when I got there, I found, number one, it was an open campus, so you can go to McDonald's or wherever at lunchtime. But the other thing was, it was multicultural. You'd have East Indians, students with turbans on their head. You have, Latinos. You have Filipinos. You have Chinese, Japanese, brothers from the hood, brothers from suburbia. It was a combination of different people. And so, like you said, when you listen, it's like, oh, okay, that's how they think.
Right.
As opposed to, well, why do you do that? Oh, okay, now I understand. So in my understanding, it gave me a level of respect.
Right.
For their, not just their culture, but their humanity.
Yeah.
And I found that at the basis and at the core of everything they were doing was really, just like I said, it was a pursuit of happiness. It was a sensitivity of respect for self and family and culture.
Yeah.
It was, for most cases, a respect for a deity or some type of deities. So there was a measure of right and wrong in all of these cultures. And when you listen, it's like, oh, okay, all of us ain't wrong. There's a commonality of our human experience, regardless of, the color of our skin, the texture of our hair, the language that we speak.
Absolutely.
The foods that we eat.
Yeah.
There's something common.
Yeah. We all want the same things. Humanity wants the same thing. We all want companionship. We all want love. We all want it's common. The way we navigate to that thing is always a difference. But it's always we always we all want the same thing. It's so incredible just to be in the midst of different people and to understand that. And you understand that stuff by listening. Like just listen to people. Like, yo, your opinion's not that that deep. You know what I'm saying? Like it is based in an opinion. It's based in your wisdom. It's based in your lifestyle, your culture, your upbringing, your your values. But just because someone values something different, like it's one of the reasons why I don't subscribe myself to any political party is because it's easier to I don't think Christians or blacks should pick any political sides. That's just my opinion. You know what I'm saying? I think you should go for the person that best fits your value system, whoever that person is. But also, it's because it's when you're not subscribed to a side, you can actually hear the truth behind what the person is actually saying versus the fluff that they're saying just because we're all on the same team. Like when you're fighting for my vote, you're fighting for my.
It's funny you say that, man. 'Cause the thing that got me, coming out of an environment where gang culture was real. It wasn't so much in the Bay Area where I was growing up with. It's not colors. But on the West Coast, Southern California was a lot more into blue and red.
Right.
And when I look at Democrat, Republican, it's blue and red.
Right.
Donkeys and elephants. It's gang banging.
It's just
and
gangsters.
You can
You
find
guys are gangsters.
you can find gang banging in church though too.
Right. Absolutely.
Whether it's denominations or with the auxiliary ministries within the church.
Absolutely.
It's like, wait a minute, what's the main thing? Let's keep the main thing the main thing. Most important thing is what? Love.
Absolutely.
When you stick, God is what? Love. You stick to for God, so what? Love the world. And what did love do? It gave. And so when you stick to the core, just keep the main thing the main thing. Everything else is fluff.
Right.
And you simplify it. The most effective businesses in the world are businesses that are very simple. When you get an Apple computer, it don't even have the name of the computer. It's just an outline of an apple. McDonald's is the golden arches.
Absolutely.
The Nike is a swoosh.
Right.
It's just when you simplify it, you keep it simple.
Absolutely. Man, speaking of things given out of love, hold up. My last part.
Okay.
Man, this is my favorite part about the Elevation podcast. Is when I get to give gifts.
Oh, wow.
Everybody that comes on here gets gifts, man.
Okay.
So you know what I mean. Everybody that comes here gets a gift.
Wow, thank you, man. Can I open it?
Yeah, you got to because everybody wants to know.
Okay, yeah. I want to know. Woo, yeah, look, gifts. Thank you, man. I didn't get you anything. Feel bad. Actually, no, I don't. Yeah, I was just talking about one of these. I saw my man Mark Tatum had one of these. I saw, man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm in that piece now. Yes, sir. I'm going to get my swole on at the gym tomorrow with this right here. Yes, sir. Bam. Can y'all see that? Sit there, reach joint. Got my reach joint in there. Bam. Yes, sir. See, this is one of the things I've always admired about you, man, is that the clothing piece, the marketing, the distribution. You understand business, man. I'm learning, man. I gotta pick your brain. Thank you, man. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Man, listen, I appreciate you coming on here. Like I said, it's an experience for me. It's different because for me, it's you know when I think to the seasons of my life in another season, right? I was trying to get to you. In another season, it was like, man, if we could just get it to Matt, and if we could just get it to Matt, and and Matt was the top of the top of the mountain for us. And so when seasons change and things change, and I appreciate seasons. I appreciate that you are different. You're a different Matt in this season than you were in prior seasons. But to get you here, it's like, man, this is really, really, this is really, really surreal for me. So I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, man.
I appreciate you being here.
That.
I appreciate you sharing the knowledge. I know everybody out here does. Just appreciate you sharing your mind and your knowledge. And I know that y'all ain't gonna be able to hear what we talking about. All right, Curtis talking about he got shoes. He did. I ain't seen no Instagram photo of it. But but I appreciate you just being here, just sharing with us, and just
Anytime,
just sitting
man.
here, man. Hope we do some things in the future.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to it, man. You blessed me when I walked in the door. Man. You were talking about some things I've been praying about for a while. I was like, oh, okay, Lord. All right, here it is. Here it is. I hear you.
That's what's up, man. Man, listen, thank you for coming. This is the Elevation Podcast. We're going to be here every Tuesday, 7:30. The